I'm Sam Chandon. I'm the founding director of the Chen Institute for Global Real Estate Finance here at NYU Stern. And I am just delighted to be able to join my conference co-chair, Anne-Marie DeCola, in welcoming you to Stern today. I'm especially thrilled to welcome students from Yale, from NYU, from Cornell, Columbia, Baruch, as well as Project Destined. We are absolutely thrilled to be able to host you today, so thank you for joining us. This is our first, but certainly not our last, program focused on innovation and sustainability. We have, as Anne-Marie described this morning, assembled just a really fantastic group of speakers and panelists who are able to opine on almost every facet of this critically important area of real estate and the built environment. It is truly my privilege to welcome Tony Malkin, Chairman, President, and CEO of Empire State Realty Trust, to Stern today. Tony, our speakers have come from all over Canada and the United States to join us today. You are the only person who has traveled all the way from New Zealand to speak with us today. So a very special thank you for making an unusually long journey to participate in today's conference. Welcome to Stern. You have been focused on sustainability in real estate longer than, I think it's fair to say, any other corporate leader or leader in the real estate industry that I could think of. So it's worth taking a step back and just asking, why did you take that, why did you focus on green and sustainability before it was sort of a topic on the table or on the agenda for our industry?
So first of all, I'd just like to say that anybody who was in the first session will be disappointed because I'm nowhere as impressive as Dana is. Dana and I have worked together since 2007. Frederick Tan is in the back there also, who joined us this past year from Stanford. And we have one other member of our team who apparently is at a doctor's appointment or something. I have no idea. But in any event, so it's funny. This all started from my wife's and my initial involvement with the environmental movement. My wife was a trustee of the Natural Resources Defense Council for more than 25 years. She's an honorary trustee there now. And it really came from back in 2005 when it became clear that we would prevail in our litigation against Leona Helmsley and her winged monkeys for the control of the Empire State Building. And at that time, the building really needed to be repositioned. About the same time, the Clinton Global Initiative started the Clinton Climate Initiative and had its first meeting in New York City. And they had the meeting atop the Hearst Tower, a LEED, from the first LEED buildings, I think maybe the first LEED building in New York City. And we got a call from the mayor's office, and at that time it was Mayor Bloomberg, and they asked, would we please light the Empire State Building green for all these people to see? Of course, the tragedy for me is why weren't they at the Empire State Building? And I knew why, because it wasn't LEED, or at the time that was sort of the standard. And I said, yes, if I can go to the event. And so I went to the event, and I met this is how the world, if you don't show up, you weren't there, And if it's not a question about you click in on a Zoom or a Teams. It's, are you in the room where it happens? And when you go into the room and when you go out of the room, that's when you learn so much. So there, completely unbeknownst to me, representing the Clinton Climate Initiative, was a fellow named Jamie Russell. And Jamie Russell happens to be my college roommate's youngest brother. And I had no idea he worked for the Clinton Climate Initiative, and or what the Clinton Climate Initiative was about, for that matter. And what he said at that moment was apocryphal, actually. He said, look, we want to talk to you. We want to talk to you about sustainability and energy efficiency. He said at that time, this is 2006 or so, he said, this whole thing about LEED misses the point. It's all about energy efficiency. And that's what I took away from that meeting. And ultimately it was about the opportunity to use sustainability, energy efficiency, to rebrand the Empire State Building, which at that time was an older and not updated building, and that began the journey.
So you're engaging with the Clinton Climate Initiative. You're talking to folks that are thinking about issues around climate change, on a global scale. Contrast that with where in 2007, the priorities are for the industry.
Well, the nascent story at the time was LEED. And the only I'll say it publicly here, the only reason we got LEED at the Empire State Building and at one or two other buildings, I don't know what other buildings we have, is because Dana said to me, I know you don't like LEED, but if you don't get LEED and you criticize it, people will say you criticized it because you couldn't get it. So we decided to get LEED, and now I criticize LEED everywhere I possibly can. And I noticed actually that Dana put in her board presentation that she's on a steering committee, and I said, I was not about the latest versions of LEED. I said, I was not aware of that, we need to talk. So anyhow, LEED was a green thing. And what I realized after I spent time with the Clinton Climate Initiative introduced us to Amory Lovins. And in that process, what I learned was that all plant walls, green, water features in a lobby, bike racks, showers, all these things for which you got points for LEED will not change the world. Actually, what we need to do is the hard work and actually reduce energy consumption. And that was the divergence. So the nascent thing at the time for the real estate industry, for new construction primarily, is still to some degree LEED, though people have begun to realize if they don't build energy efficiently, they will have already built an outmoded product like Hudson Yards, like One Vanderbilt, already are outmoded because they use old technology or no technology. And that was the big break. That was the breakthrough. So at the time, small interest in LEED, no one thinking about energy efficiency.
So I want to go off script for a second, just to ask you a little bit more about this.
I live off script, so that's perfect.
So I think we figured that out in just the last couple of minutes. You own what I think I will certainly argue is sort of the most iconic office building in the world, certainly the most recognizable as a signature asset. So you have a range of different ways in which you can signal to the market what you're doing in terms of energy efficiency. For the relatively small or medium-sized landlord or portfolio owner, what would you recommend then? If LEED is not sort of the most appropriate or most effective way of signaling and messaging to the market, this is what we're doing in terms of energy efficiency. What are some of the alternatives out there for someone that doesn't own the Empire State Building?
So let's be clear. The Empire State Building is just a big building. It's 93 years young. We have, in the balance of our 10 million square feet portfolio, all our office is older. And what we like to say is we are accessible energy efficiency, sustainability, indoor environmental quality, and healthy buildings. So we, at the same time in 2007, by the way, thanks to SARS, we had already begun to address things like the better air filtration. We've begun to investigate active bipolar ionization. And by the way, when I say we, Dana and I have partnered on this literally since I first met her in 2007. And at the time, she worked for JLL, and now she is the SVP in charge of energy, sustainability, and ESG at the Empire State Realty Trust. There is nothing that we do which isn't financially driven, period. So it's all investment and return oriented. And I would just suggest that you can go online, you can look at the Tenant Energy Optimization Program, TEOP, at Urban Land Institute. That's something on which we worked and which we completed and we put out there for free. The Empire Playbook, which is on NYSERDA's website, the Empire Playbook, and you can put in Empire Playbook Empire State Building and you'll get to ours. You can look at ESRT.com and go to our sustainability report. Everything that we do is accessible to a building that is 75,000 square feet or larger. 50 to 75,000, 75,000 square feet or larger makes a lot of sense. And there is low-hanging fruit or fruit lying on the ground everywhere. Yeah. So it's not just a matter of, oh, you know, you own this big building. We fight it out. It's a big building. Our fights are just the same. They're just at a larger scale. Yeah. We fight it out on a per square foot basis.
Right. So you meet Dana in 2007, a pivot point. In your thinking about sustainability issues. Fast forward to 2024, 2023. How does your thinking about, how does your definition of sustainability today, how is it different from sort of what it would have been, in the 2007 pre-financial crisis period?
So, look, I've been in a financial crisis since I started in the business in 1990, 1989, when I left the private equity business to join with my family. It's unchanged. The only changes are that when we did version 1.0 at the Empire State Building, and then through our entire portfolio, we looked at 64 different potential measures and processes and technologies, and we used 8 in combination to achieve our results, which were, at the time, targeted 38% reduction in energy consumption and a relative related amount of carbon reduction, and actually turned out to be like 50% of is what we accomplished. And now we've just completed version 2.0, the study for it, and we have begun to implement that. And that process of implementation, just so we're clear, you use life cycle cost analysis. You do it over time when you would replace other systems anyway. You replace them with the right measures which integrate together. We looked at over 200 different products and services and technologies. So from 64 to over 200, what's really changed is the accessibility to technology and to processes and the commercialization of these to be able to effect change. Outside of that, we have the exact same conversations today which we had in 2007. And to be fair, at the time, when I first met Dana, I think she was like 12 or something and had just been let free from UVA, where we were going down in April to teach together. The first person with whom I spoke and with whom I met on this and who really coordinated this originally was Ray Carteraro, who's now at JP Morgan Chase. And he ran construction for Jones Lang LaSalle, and we had chosen Ray Carteraro and his department for the Empire State rebuilding process. And that is through Ray that I met Dana and Wendy Falk, with whom Dana worked at the time. The two of them worked on the project together. And so I just think it's important along these journeys, there were other people involved who could make these things. Amory Lovins, incredibly important, the folks at Johnson Controls back in the day, the other people at the Rocky Mountain Institute. I mean, version 2.0, when we're working on it, we are so far ahead of where the Rocky Mountain Institute is today, and yet they were so far ahead of us, and key lessons we learned and incorporated in our work.
So you mentioned CCI, but I want to delve a little bit deeper into the way in which your engagement with the public sector has helped you advance your sustainability mission, whether it be sort of on the policy side or engagement with elected officials at the local level here in New York City, or sort of at the federal level as well.
So again, Dana and I as a team, when I had some veins ablated in my legs a few years back, and you have to walk for 40 minutes after that process. So I walked from the Upper West Side through Central Park, and I said, you know what? This thing had been on my mind the whole time. I'm just going to call Dana Schneider, because at that time she was working at Jones Lang LaSalle, and I said, look, I can't continue to show up everywhere to say, yes, we're experts and we're leaders in this, and here's the person on our team who does this, and she has a Jones Lang LaSalle card, JLL card. So I had 2 procedures, and in those 2 procedures and the 2 walks, I convinced Dana to join us. What I was not aware is that Dana had turned down a number of other offers to leave JLL, but didn't want to because she wanted to continue to work with us on the work that we do. And a big component of that is not just the work, it's also the intersection of practice and policy. So we are very involved in the room where it happens on local, state, and federal processes. And I served on the Local Law 97 Advisory Implementation Board for the Department of Buildings. Dana is on the Sustainability Council for New York City. Empire State Realty Trust is the only commercial for-profit landlord representation on either of those two. We're very close with New York State, with New York State Energy Research Development Authority, with NYSERDA. We have worked with Doreen Harris and people in her area, but we go all the way back to Richard Kaufman, who used to be the energy czar for New York State under Andrew Cuomo. I'm the chair of the Sustainability Policy Advisory Committee for the Real Estate Roundtable, which is the umbrella lobbying group in Washington, D.C. All the tax credits that are in the Inflation Reduction Act, those are things that we got in there, and it's not like we slid them in. We've been lobbying on these items for 10 years in Washington, D.C., and this bill came along, and our bona fides and our credibility are already there. We got the Better Buildings Initiative passed into law in 2015, signed into law in April of 2015. We got that passed unanimously in the New York, in the U.S. Senate, excuse me, and that establishes Energy Star certification for tenant spaces, not just for buildings, which is very important because everybody wants a cookie, everyone wants a certification, and Energy Star for tenant spaces is so much better than LEED because it actually deals with energy consumption reduction. So we, on a federal level, on a national level, on a local level, we are at the cutting edge in the room where it happens. Cecil Scheib, who was up here just a moment ago, a very active participant in the working group, which Scott Frank and I co-headed, and in which Dana played a critical role, which is the technical working group about how do we actually implement and what is implementable. And there were, a couple dozen of really excellent engineers and practitioners who contributed thousands of hours of their time collectively to get that stuff right. So this is the biggest thing that I will do in my life, not business stuff. Actually, the biggest thing will be my wife's and my marriage and our family. Aside from that,
Good save.
yeah, she's not here. And just so we're clear, by the way, I didn't fly back from New Zealand for this. I was coming back anyway. I changed my return by 2 days in order to be able to be here.
Let me live my dream and tell people that you came back from my conference.
Right, I know. And splurged carbon everywhere in order to do it.
I know you bought carbon offsets along the way.
Yeah, right. I don't know what Air New Zealand's up to in that regard. But so no, in all seriousness, it's super important to be present on the policy, and it's super important to inform policy with practice. Local Law 97 fails because though it intends to do the right thing, it did not incorporate practice. And now what we have done is we've identified what needs to be undone or redone in Local Law 97. For instance, Local Law 97 is an electrification bill. So long as you electrify, they're happy. And the reason that they say that is that, well, if you electrify and the CLCPA targets for New York State on the grid go to an entirely renewable grid, well, then it's all good and clean. It's not okay, because actually, with all this new electric burden, we will now have peak demand times in winter for electricity. Peak demand winter, not summer. We're all accustomed to, oh gosh, why is the library darker? You know, why is it a little warmer? Because Con Ed has dialed up and said we need a demand response reduction. But what happens when they say we need a demand response reduction and NYCHA or other places where people live have to cut heating because everything is electrified? We need to get to energy conservation. I know we're going all over the place. So and he's got a number of questions that I wrote. So we should probably get back to them.
Just put it all out there, Tony. Dana, I have to say you're getting a lot of airtime, in this conversation too. And as a plug, from your comments for this afternoon, folks, after lunch we're going to be focused on local law 97, C-PACE financing with some of the best folks who are thinking about C-PACE financing, but also critically public health issues and health and well-being in public spaces and in the built environment. So please, do stick around as we elaborate a little bit further on some of these conversations. Today, what are the 3 most exciting things that you see happening in sustainability?
I think, number one, the awareness that energy efficiency really matters. And that's one of the things that needs to be changed. Actually, we won't change local law 97. We hope for a new piece of legislation out of New York City that will advance energy efficiency from 2030 to today. All right, we need a strong signal to business. That's so the fact that people have begun to focus on energy efficiency is incredibly meaningful and important. Signals in general, I'll make that number one. The signal that if you look at your CapEx, if you look at where you lease, if you look at where you build, if you don't take into account energy efficiency and sustainability, you have failed. And your buildings will not attract the same quality number of tenants, both things, quality and number of tenants, and you will suffer. Number 2 is we actually have begun to educate now the policymakers. Before, right now, I'd say version 1.0 of engagement with policy and government has been catch-up. Now we're on the front foot. The fact that when the Inflation Reduction Act came into being and these matters needed to be put in there, we were able to go to Senator Joe Manchin, yes folks, Joe Manchin, and he put them in the Inflation Reduction Act. Tax credits for on-site energy generation, for on-site energy storage, for different technologies, for electric vehicle charging stations, the improvement of Reg 179D, which is actually a tax deduction, which has been on the books since the George Bush administration. However, which was set at such high standards, no one could ever avail themselves of it. So now it's been changed from a standard to a benchmark. This is where you started, this is what you spent, this is to where you got, this is the tax benefit you get. So the second thing is the fact that policy and practice have begun to catch up with each other. The third thing to me is, look, I could count on my 2 hands, the fingers that I've got on them, that is, the number of people who really knew, actually probably one hand, the number of people who really knew about what it took to create energy efficiency in the existing built environment in 2007. And now, we're part of a much, much larger group of people. And young folks, it's not just the soft side, it's the hardcore engineering side, it's the business case, it's the financial analysis. When we have an issue with staffing, I said to Dana a couple of years ago, look, it's hard to hire in this area. We've got to go to the schools. And we've got to show up at the schools and find people who are interested in this and grab their attention. Frederick Tan, who's in the back there, literally in the back, which I guess is, I don't know, is that where you were at Stanford? In the very back row? No? You're in the front, right. So, but he met Dana through Dana's presence in an online class for Stanford, where I think that's the story I've got, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah, he says that's correct. Okay. And so we'll go to UVA to talk about this, NYU, Columbia, and the number of people who now realize this is a business proposition. So those are the 3 elements, and the more people understand the brass tacks, the hard-ass angles on this, the better we will be.
So let's flip that. What do you see as the biggest blind spots right now in our industry? There are 3 blind spots. One is there are still a lot of people who are drinking their own Kool-Aid. And so I mentioned Jeff Blau of Related spoke at a Wells Fargo Real Estate Investment Trust conference earlier this week. And his comment was, all this old stuff is
it's not worth it. Everyone's only going to want to be in brand new buildings, and like what we're doing at Hudson Yards, and it's the most advanced energy. Baloney. They're going to pay fines. And what we need to do is recognize there's an economic imperative and opportunity in older buildings, because not everybody can afford $150, $200, $250, $300 a square foot leases, even if the buildings were energy efficient, which they are not. We have to change the existing stock. If you don't change what's out there, in New York City, if you look out 15 years, 90% of the office buildings are already here. You have to change them. All right, so that's part one. Part two is the fallacy, is people drinking their own Kool-Aid. Part two is this issue around the need to get away from the greenwashing in general. It's not about bike racks, showers, water features, plant walls, signage. You have to do the hard work. And in Europe, they get it. And people will begin to get it here in America. AFIRE and the leadership from AFIRE is here in the room. They get it. And their members are getting sick and tired of giving the United States real estate industry a hall pass. And by the way, that also will hit not just equity providers, also lenders. You'll get a worse appraisal underwriting for a loan if you're not sustainable and energy efficient. It's just a fact. So the second piece is the slow to adopt folks and the recognition that we need to change. The third thing is that policymakers really have not, they have begun to embrace that they have to understand what practice is before they write policy. And that's a big issue. And that's why the work we do with the EPA in DC, where we come up with voluntary standards, which we can then go to the folks in local municipalities who want to make new laws and say, use the standards that are already at the EPA. We'll never get nationally mandated programs, but we can get national standards which can be implemented locally.
I had the good fortune of attending Gunnar Branson's conference last week, and was able to sort of chat with folks at AFIRE, and to reinforce your point, because we also, I took a group of MBAs to Europe earlier this month, and one of the things that we were struck by there, and that I was struck by, representing NYU individually at the AFIRE conference, was how central the discussion around sustainability was and is to every single thread of conversation. And to your point, it's just a different world here.
Yeah, you got to go to where the puck will be. If you're chasing the puck into the corner, you're not going to score a goal. By the way, Wayne Gretzky's dad said that, not Wayne Gretzky. You've got to go to where the puck will be, and that's on what we have focused. And actually, we have focused on in our work, we want to make the plays. We want to help define the rules. The change is urgent because you have to build it into your plans, your capital expenditure plans over time. We may end up in 2030 or 2035 that we may end up having to pay some fines at ESRT. It won't be because we don't have the technology. It's because we won't go into a tenant space that will expire in a year where we know the tenant will leave and retrofit all of their lighting fixtures in order to hit a bogey and just have it all wiped out. If you ask me, one of the biggest issues out there is the recognition that, or the lack of recognition, that so many of the steps that we take involve embodied carbon. And embodied carbon is what it takes to build a windmill. It's what it takes to build a new building. People talk about stores of carbon in forests. Let's talk about stores of carbon in existing buildings. Steel, glass, masonry, concrete, cables and wiring. You tear all that stuff down, it's just like you've torched a forest. And so what you need to do is we need to look at what this embodied carbon piece is. We need to look at life cycle cost analysis, and we need to send the signals now so people make their 5, 10, 15, 20-year CapEx plans unified in an integrated fashion so that it incorporates energy efficiency and sustainability as these changes get made. You don't want to slap it on after you're done. It's got to be part of your planning.
Kenny, I see I've just run out of time, but I'm going to just allow myself one more
It just
minute.
says now it says we have 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's for the next panel. Too.
Okay.
I know we could fill the time, and but just as a quick closing question for you.
I came back all this way for this. I mean, really?
We've got 10 universities represented in the audience, in addition to all of our friends in industry. For folks that are early in their careers and thinking about how it is that they become part of, the existential issue of our time for anyone thinking about the built environment, what's your recommendation?
Look, you've got to network with people who are already involved. It's the first and most important thing. So, I'm very old. Dana, of course, is ageless, however, older. I'd ask Frederick in the back, how is it that he got on his journey, and how did he find us? You have to network, and you have to go to places where your business in which you will be involved is integrated into the business to which you go. Dana's group is right there next to CapEx, property management, leasing, and design. She used to actually be much closer to me, and I said, this does not make sense. You've got these people, we don't have any offices. I mean, I don't have an office. We're all open plan. You need to be able to stick your head up and look at the people and say, we're thinking about this. What does it mean? Right? As opposed to don't end up in a sustainability department where you're alone with a great title and you have no say about what goes on. And if you make that determination, people who want to hire you will realize in order to attract this talent, we have to have this talent integrated in what we do every day. Otherwise, the talent will not come.
Tony, truly a privilege. Thank you so much for joining us.